Refusing the crown sounds, on its face, like the most dramatic thing a royal heir could possibly do. But if you actually look at the Spanish royal family's own history, refusal isn't some unthinkable rupture. It's happened 3 times in living memory, inside the very same branch of the Bourbon family Leonor belongs to, for 3 completely different reasons. Understanding what would actually happen if Leonor refused the throne means understanding that history first, and because it turns out the House of Bourbon has a surprisingly well-worn path for exactly this scenario. Let's start with the mechanics, because the word refuse covers more than one legal reality depending on when it happens. Leonor is currently the heir presumptive, not a reigning monarch, so she cannot abdicate a crown she doesn't yet hold. What she could do, at any point before her father's reign ends, is renounce her place in the line of succession entirely. Spain's constitution treats this under Article 57.5, the same clause that governs abdication, stating that renunciations, like abdications, are resolved through an organic law passed by the Cortes Generales. This means refusing the throne in Spain has never been a private decision. It has always required the machinery of the state itself to formally process the exit, exactly as it did when Juan Carlos abdicated in 2014, with a specific piece of legislation debated and voted on by Parliament before it took legal effect. Now here's where the family history becomes genuinely useful, because Leonor's own great-great-uncles lived through almost exactly this scenario, twice, within 10 days of each other, in the summer of 1933. King Alfonso XIII, Leonor's great-great-grandfather, had 2 elder sons ahead of his eventual heir, and both of them stepped aside from the succession, for reasons that could not have been more different from one another. The elder, Infante Alfonso, renounced his rights specifically so he could marry a woman who wasn't of royal blood, a Cuban woman named Edelmira Sampedro, choosing love and a self-determined life over the throne, in a decision made almost entirely on his own terms. 10 days later, his younger brother, Infante Jaime, was pressured by their father into renouncing his own claim, because Alfonso XIII had decided that Jaime's deafness, the result of a childhood illness, made him unfit to govern. Jaime's renunciation letter framed the decision as an act of love for the Spanish people, wanting the monarchy's restoration to rest on the surest possible succession. But contemporary accounts make clear this wasn't really Jaime's free choice at all. A delegation of monarchist advisors was sent specifically to persuade him, and by some accounts, they privately admitted that under normal circumstances he could have reigned perfectly well despite his deafness. Jaime spent decades afterward trying, unsuccessfully, to have that renunciation invalidated, arguing it had never truly been voluntary. That detail matters enormously for anyone thinking through what a modern refusal would look like, because it shows that a renunciation isn't always the clean, decisive gesture it appears to be from the outside. It can be contested for the rest of a person's life. It can be reversed in intention, if never in legal fact. And it can originate not from the heir's own wishes at all, but from pressure applied by the family and advisors around them, dressed up afterward in the language of personal sacrifice for the nation. The third renunciation in this same family is the one that actually built the modern monarchy Leonor will inherit, and it's a genuinely moving piece of history. Juan de Borbón, Jaime's younger brother, had spent decades as the legitimate heir to the Spanish throne in exile, watching Franco groom his own son, Juan Carlos, as the eventual head of state instead. In May 1977, 2 years after Franco's death and Juan Carlos's accession, Juan de Borbón traveled to the Zarzuela Palace and formally renounced his own dynastic rights in his son's favor, in a brief, emotional ceremony, reportedly telling Juan Carlos simply, Majestad, todo por España, Your Majesty, everything for Spain, before standing at attention before his own son. That renunciation wasn't about unfitness or forbidden love. It was about accepting political reality, recognizing that Juan Carlos, not himself, was the one Spain had already accepted as its path back to constitutional government, and choosing national stability over his own personal claim. 3 renunciations, 3 completely different motives: personal love, a father's judgment about capability, and a son's acceptance of political reality over his own inherited entitlement. If Leonor ever refused the throne, whatever her reasons turned out to be, she would be stepping into a family tradition that already contains almost every conceivable version of that decision, which makes the question less about whether refusal is unthinkable and more about which version of it might apply to her. So what would actually happen, mechanically, if Leonor chose this path today? The Council of Ministers would need to draft an organic law addressing her renunciation, similar in form to the single-article law that processed Juan Carlos's abdication in 2014. That law would need approval from the government, formal submission to the Cortes Generales, debate, and a vote requiring an absolute majority in the Congress of Deputies, before being signed and published in the official state gazette. And the moment that law took effect, the line of succession would move immediately to the next person in it, her younger sister, Infanta Sofia, born in 2007, who would become the new Princess of Asturias and heir to the Spanish throne. That's not speculation. That's simply how Article 57's ordering of succession by proximity and birth order works, the exact same mechanism that would have shifted the throne away from Leonor entirely if she'd been born with an older brother. It's worth pausing on what that would actually mean for Sofia specifically, because unlike Leonor, who has spent her entire adult life being deliberately built toward this role, through military academies across all three branches, an international education, and a constitutional oath already sworn, Sofia has not undergone anything close to the same preparation. She's chosen a different, quieter path, and reports have noted her attending university outside Spain, a markedly less public trajectory than her sisters. A sudden shift in the succession would mean asking a young woman who has not spent years training for the constitutional weight of the position to absorb it essentially overnight, precisely the kind of abrupt, underprepared transition the monarchy's entire modern formation strategy, built around years of visible, methodical preparation, seems designed to avoid. Now, the honest and important caveat, the one that has to sit at the center of this entire video: there is no evidence anywhere in Leonor's public record suggesting she wants to do this. Quite the opposite. Every choice she's made publicly points toward total, sustained commitment to the role. She asked the Spanish people to trust her, on the day she swore her oath. She voluntarily completed 3 years of extraordinarily demanding military training across the Army, Navy, and Air Force, a level of preparation her own father never underwent as heir. She's about to begin a university degree explicitly designed around her future role as head of state. None of that is the behavior of someone looking for an exit. If anything, her biography reads as a rebuttal, in advance, to exactly the question this video is built around. But there's a reason the question is still worth asking seriously, and it has to do with the specific historical moment Leonor occupies compared to her ancestors. When Alfonso and Jaime renounced their claims in 1933, the Spanish monarchy was already in exile, its practical power already gone, and a personal renunciation barely registered as a threat to an institution that had already lost its throne. When Juan de Borbón renounced in 1977, he was handing power to a son who had already, functionally, become head of state, smoothing over a succession that had effectively already happened. Leonor's situation carries none of that cushioning. The modern Spanish monarchy has spent the last decade rebuilding its legitimacy after her own grandfather's financial scandals and exile, a rebuilding project that depends heavily on a smooth, uneventful, visibly well-prepared handover to the next generation. A renunciation today wouldn't land in a monarchy that had already lost its throne or already transferred its power. It would land in the middle of an active, still fragile institutional repair project, and it would very likely be read, whether fairly or not as a family matter but as evidence that the whole project had failed. That's really the honest answer to what would happen if Leonor refused the throne. Legally, the mechanism already exists, tested as recently as 2014, and the next name in line is already known. Historically, her own family has walked this exact path 3 times, for 3 different reasons, none of which map perfectly onto anything we currently know about her. And institutionally, the stakes of a modern refusal would be far heavier than anything her great-great-uncles faced, precisely because the monarchy she'd be stepping away from is still, quietly, proving to a skeptical public that it deserves to exist at all. Nothing in the record suggests she's going anywhere. But if she ever did, Spain already has, buried in its own family history, a full and surprisingly candid playbook for exactly how that departure would unfold.